You were just beginning to love them. You finally memorized the rhythm of their breath, the way their paws tapped the floor, the silent language in their eyes, and then they were gone. It doesn't make sense, does it? Why would a soul so gentle, so good, be taken so soon? Maybe you've told yourself it was just life, just chance, just biology, but something deeper in you disagrees. Something whispers, no, that wasn't random, because you felt it, didn't you? That they didn't just walk into your life, they were sent. And maybe they left because their mission was already complete. But what if I told you that love like that never leaves for no reason? That there may be a spiritual contract, a hidden design behind the heartbreak. If you've ever lost a pet too soon, this message is for you. You haven't lost them. You're just beginning to remember why they came. Before we go any further, I want to ask you something. If you've ever lost a pet too soon, would you share their story in the comments? Someone out there may need to hear exactly what you've lived through. You're not alone in this. And maybe your words will help someone begin to heal. Because healing doesn't always come from answers. Sometimes it begins in the echo of someone else's pain. So let me tell you a story. A quiet one. A real one. One I've heard more than once, in different names and faces. Her name was Sarah. She was 32, living alone in a small apartment in Portland. Life hadn't been kind. 2 years earlier, she'd lost her father unexpectedly. A month after the funeral, her long-term partner left. Then came the depression, slow, invisible, but total. The kind of emptiness that doesn't scream. It just lingers, like a fog that never lifts. And then came Benny, a stray golden retriever puppy rescued from a nearby shelter. She didn't plan to adopt him. I just walked in to look, she said. But when their eyes met, something happened. She didn't have the words for it, but it felt ancient, as if she already knew him. Benny was small, soft, clumsy, and full of mischief, but somehow he cracked open the silence inside her. Every morning, she had a reason to get up, to walk, to laugh again. He became her anchor, her breath, her reason. And just when things were starting to feel okay again, when the colors were returning and the air wasn't so heavy, Benny got sick, fast. It was something rare, something the vets couldn't stop. Within a week, he was gone. 8 months. That's all he stayed. Sarah said it broke her in a different way. Not like before. This time it was sacred. It was like he came just to rescue me, she whispered. And when I could walk again, he left. The silence after him felt different, not empty, but complete. Like his soul had folded into hers, like he had given her what she needed and was never meant to stay longer than that. That kind of love, it doesn't ask for time, it just asks for presence. Some connections don't last long because they were never meant to. And what if those are the most powerful ones of all? Maybe you've felt it too, that strange sense that some souls were always meant to find you, like they weren't random at all, like they remembered you long before you remembered them. And maybe now, after hearing Sarah's story, something inside you is stirring. A question, a quiet possibility. What if your pet didn't just show up, but returned? What if you agreed to find each other before you were even born? This might sound like fantasy, but it's a concept that one of the most remarkable spiritual figures of the 20th century explored in depth. His name was Edgar Cayce. They called him the sleeping prophet, a man who entered deep trance states and dictated thousands of readings, many of them involving health, dreams, karma, reincarnation, and yes, the souls of animals. Cayce believed that animals are not just beings of instinct. Some, he said, carry spiritual memory echoes of consciousness that travel across time and space, just like human souls. He described a universe where nothing is accidental, where even the creatures who walk beside us have made silent agreements before this life began to enter ours for a reason. Cayce's readings suggest that long before birth, souls gather and make what he called soul contracts, agreements, promises. These aren't written in ink, but in energy, between your soul and theirs. Some of these contracts are between people, parents, lovers, teachers, but others are between human souls and animal ones. Not all animals, of course, but some. The ones that show up with purpose, the ones that feel like messengers, the ones that arrive during your darkest nights and vanish just as quietly when the dawn breaks. Cayce didn't romanticize this. He said plainly some animals are sent to help balance karmic energy. Others come to unlock something sleeping inside you. A memory, a wound, a healing. They are like spiritual catalysts. They might not stay long because they don't need to. Their purpose is precise, sacred, and timed. Imagine, for a moment, that your pet, whether still alive or now gone, chose you. Imagine that somewhere, before time began, there was a moment between your soul and theirs. A simple, beautiful agreement. When the time comes, I will come to you. Not for long, but long enough. This is the heart of the soul contract idea. Not fate in the rigid sense, but love with direction, healing with timing. Not all beings are meant to walk the full road with us. Some only walk a few steps, but those few steps change the entire path. And you might have known this on some level. From the beginning, you might have looked into their eyes the first time you met and felt something ancient, familiar, like their soul was older than their body, like you were remembering them, not meeting them. Edgar Cayce believed that when we feel that flash of recognition, that deep connection without words, it's not coincidence. It's memory. It's soul memory. And if this feels true to you, not because you read it, but because something inside you has always quietly known it, then maybe you're not imagining things after all. Maybe they really were meant to find you. Maybe they always were. Before we go deeper, I want to pause and ask you something personal. Have you ever dreamed of them after they were gone? Felt them nearby in the silence of your room? Or looked into the eyes of a new animal and felt a sudden, unexplainable recognition, like you were being seen again by someone you had already loved? If that's ever happened to you, tell me in the comments. You might think it's nothing, but I promise you, you're not alone. And maybe the story you share could be the exact story that heals someone else. Because grief has a strange way of making us feel isolated until someone speaks a truth we've been too quiet to say aloud. So, let's speak it. Let's say the quiet thing. What if they didn't leave too soon? What if they left? Right on time. You see, we grow up believing that the length of time equals value, that more years together means more meaning. But what if that's not true? What if some souls are like shooting stars, brief, radiant, and unforgettable, not because they burned out, but because they were never meant to stay? Edgar Cayce spoke of this when he described animals who complete their task, and then move on. Not out of cruelty, not as punishment, but because their contract, their mission, their sacred assignment was complete. What if your pet was one of those souls, a messenger, a quiet guide, a teacher in fur and bone, sent to awaken something in you at the exact moment you needed it most? They didn't come to be with you forever. They came to be with you precisely for a chapter, for a transformation, to bring you through something you didn't think you'd survive. And once you were on the other side, they left. You might not realize it right away. In fact, you may resist it. The grief, the shock, it's too loud. But somewhere, when the ache softens just enough, you start to see it. You start to remember the timing. You realize they came into your life when you were falling apart, or right after you lost someone else, or during a period when your world was grey and nothing made sense. And somehow, in their quiet way, they brought colour back. They anchored you. They gave you a reason to keep going, even if it was just to feed them, to walk them, to feel their warmth beside you at night. And then, as softly as they arrived, they were gone. No warning, no long goodbye, just a quiet ending. And maybe that's what hurts the most. It felt unfinished. But what if it wasn't? What if that sense of incompletion was the lesson? The reminder that love cannot be caged by time, that presence is not measured in years, but in how deeply it touches us. There are people who live 90 years and never once allow their heart to truly open. And yet, a small cat or dog who spends 9 months with you can break you wide open and let the light in. Why? Because their love was unconditional. They didn't come to demand anything. They came to give. And often, they gave just enough to get you through. I've heard countless stories so similar. They almost form a pattern. A man grieving the loss of his child adopts a dog without knowing why. That dog becomes his anchor. 2 years later, the dog passes suddenly, right after the man has reconnected with life. A woman in recovery from trauma finds a rescue cat who stares at her like he's known her for lifetimes. She writes in her journal, "He holds my pain like he's seen it before." One day, he simply slips away in his sleep, leaving her changed. Another woman wakes up crying from a dream where her old pet walks towards her, looks into her soul, and simply says, "I came back to remind you of who you are." These are not just sentimental tales. They are echoes. Echoes of a deeper truth that not all love is here to stay. Some love is here to shift you, to crack the shell of numbness, to stir the still waters, to plant something that will grow long after they're gone. And sometimes, when you meet a new animal on the street, at a shelter, in a dream you feel something strange, familiar, as if you're picking up where something once left off. Children feel this especially. A child may say, "This dog feels like Max." Even if Max passed away years ago, they don't question it. They remember, because their hearts haven't been taught to forget yet. Maybe you've had that moment too. Maybe you looked into new eyes and thought, "I know you, but how could that be? How could the soul of one animal find you again?" Cayce said it was possible, not common, but possible for certain animal souls to return when the human they loved still carried a need. He didn't say they always come back in the same form. Sometimes they return in dreams, sometimes in energy, sometimes in a new body with old habits. A little paw curl you remember, a way of tilting the head, A sound that hits you with a wave of déjà vu so strong it takes your breath away. You're not imagining it. The soul remembers what the mind cannot explain. That's why grief feels spiritual, because it is. When someone you love leaves, suddenly, especially a soul so pure, so innocent, so filled with presence, you feel like something has been ripped out of the invisible fabric of your life. But Cayce believed nothing is ever truly lost, just moved, just transformed, just waiting. Maybe you were never meant to keep them forever. Maybe you were meant to awaken, to love, and to let go, knowing that true love always returns in one form or another. Because souls don't count years, they count awakenings. And if you're here, still listening, still breathing through the pain, still asking the bigger questions, then maybe you're already living the answer. If your heart is still here with me, quiet, listening, maybe even a little cracked open, then I want to take you one step deeper. Because when you've loved that deeply and lost that suddenly, you don't just want comfort, you want meaning. You want to know that all this wasn't just a cruel twist of fate, that the goodbye you never got to say had a purpose written in it all along. So let's ask the question our soul is already whispering. What if separation is an illusion? What if the moment they left wasn't the end of anything, but the completion of something much older, a closing of a sacred loop, a circle, not a break? Edgar Cayce believed that time isn't linear the way we perceive it. He said souls move in patterns of return and remembrance. That means what feels like an ending to you may actually be a return to origin, a homecoming on a higher level of the soul. And if that's true, then maybe grief isn't proof that something's gone. Maybe it's proof that something was real, that something touched your life in such a deep, divine way. It left an imprint you'll carry forever. And that imprint, that ache, that sudden lump in your throat when you remember them, isn't pain to be erased. It's proof that love lived here. And it's still alive. You see, we tend to believe that love must look a certain way to be valid. It has to last a long time. It has to be mutual. It has to stay. But the soul knows better. The soul knows that real love shows up exactly when it's needed, says what it came to say through actions, glances, presence, and then, if its message is delivered, it leaves. Not out of abandonment, but out of sacred timing. It's like a teacher who leaves the room after the final lesson. Like a star that burns bright, just long enough for you to see the path, and then fades, so you learn to walk on your own. What if your pet was that teacher? What if their tiny body carried an ancient task? And what if, in the moment they left, they fulfilled their final promise to return your heart to you, more open than it had ever been? Some people say they dream of their pets years after they're gone. In those dreams, they're not sick, they're not old, they're whole, healthy, radiant. Sometimes they speak, sometimes they just look at you, but almost always, there's peace. And you wake up feeling like something important happened, like a message was delivered, even if you don't have words for it. That is not just a dream. That is a visitation, a confirmation, a spiritual tether reminding you this connection was never lost, only transformed. And perhaps the reason it hurts so deeply is not because it ended too soon, but because your soul recognized the depth of what it truly was. A moment of shared light, a meeting across lifetimes, a sacred contract fulfilled in silence. And here's something even more beautiful. Just because they left doesn't mean the story is over. It means this chapter is complete. It means the next lesson belongs to you. Because true teachers don't give you all the answers. They give you the tools to become someone who seeks. And if you're listening to this now, still searching, still wondering, still holding on to that thread between love and loss, then maybe you're already becoming exactly who they came to awaken. Maybe the greatest tribute to their short time here isn't to forget or even to move on, but to live more fully, to love more bravely, to remember more deeply. They didn't just die, they left something behind, a part of themselves inside you, a spark, a shift, a change in how you see the world. And that is the definition of soul impact, of divine timing, of a mission fulfilled. So the next time you miss them, the next time it hits you in waves, the smell, the sound, the shadow by your feet, remember this absence is not the opposite of presence. It is its echo. And echoes only exist where something powerful once was. If this is starting to feel true for you, not just as an idea, but as something your heart already knows, then I want you to stay with me. Because everything we've explored so far isn't just ancient wisdom. It's alive. It's quietly unfolding in the world around us, in real lives, in everyday moments, often without language, but always with meaning. And maybe, just maybe, once you begin to notice it, you'll start seeing your own story in a new light. Let's start with something simple. Have you ever noticed how, in the midst of grief, chaos, or depression, people often turn to animals for comfort? It's almost instinctual. When words fail, when human support feels too complex or too distant, we reach for something silent, something pure, a paw, a nudge, a warm presence that asks for nothing and offers everything. There's a reason for this, and the modern world is slowly starting to recognize it. We now have therapy animals in hospitals, hospice centers, trauma recovery programs, even prisons. Dogs are brought to disaster zones, war zones, and school shootings, not just to distract people, but to regulate their nervous systems. It's not a trend, it's a remembrance, a returning to something ancient, the idea that animals are more than companions. They are emotional guides, energy stabilizers, messengers of peace that speak directly to our soul's biology. And while science calls it animal-assisted therapy, what's really happening is more spiritual than clinical. These beings aren't just calming us, they're anchoring us. They're reminding us what safety feels like, what presence feels like, what it means to simply exist in a moment without judgment, without performance, without fear. And for many people, especially in the West where so many suffer in silence, pets become something more than family. They become lifelines, emotional mirrors, sometimes even the first safe relationship a person has ever known. Now think about this. What if the pet who saved you wasn't just a good fit or a happy coincidence? What if they were sent? What if their very presence in your life was a response to a spiritual request your soul made long before you could name the pain? That would explain why some animals seem to show up at just the right time, why some adopt us more than we adopt them, why so many people say, "I didn't choose them, they chose me." And if that feels familiar, it should. Because this language of fate, of timing, of soul recognition, It shows up across thousands of testimonies, across cultures, across belief systems, from rural farmers to urban healers, from grieving children to spiritual elders. The pattern repeats. They showed up when I needed them most. And sometimes they return. Yes, even now. In this age of skepticism and science, more and more people are quietly sharing stories they once kept private. Stories of a new pet who behaves exactly like the one they lost, who sleeps in the same corner, responds to the same nickname, who appears at the same time of year, sometimes even on the anniversary of the other's passing. Coincidence? Maybe. But for many, it doesn't feel like coincidence. It feels like continuation, like something eternal slipping briefly back into form. Cayce spoke of this possibility that a soul, especially one closely bonded to yours, could return again not out of karma, but out of love, not to repeat the past, but to walk with you a little further, to finish the circle you started together. And while not every animal comes back, some do. The question is, would you recognize them if they did, or would you dismiss the feeling, the familiarity, the pull toward a creature you can't explain? In today's world, we're trained to ignore intuition, but your soul never forgets. It will tug gently at your awareness, through a look, a gesture, a presence that feels like home. And when you stop, when you allow yourself to feel beyond logic, you may realize they're here, not as they were, but not entirely different either. You see, love doesn't end, and neither do soul connections. They just change form, evolve, ripple forward into new expressions. And the world today, as fast and disconnected as it seems, is full of these ripples. From the rise in people seeking pet psychics not for novelty, but for closure, to the growing belief in animal reincarnation across spiritual circles and even mainstream wellness platforms. The message is the same. The old ways are returning. The ways of remembering, of honoring, of listening to more than what the eyes can see. Maybe that's why so many people keep the ashes of their pets, wear pendants with their fur, light candles on their anniversaries. These aren't just grieving rituals, they're soul rituals. A way of saying you mattered, you still do, I know you're near. So if you felt something you couldn't explain, if you've had a moment where you sensed their presence, saw them in a dream, or found yourself crying at a dog you've never met, don't push it away. That's not madness. That's memory. That's your soul speaking. And in a world that forgets so quickly, that tells us to move on, to let go, to be rational, maybe the most powerful thing you can do is remember, not just the pet you lost, but the deeper truth they came to show you, that love is energy, that presence transcends time, and that some souls were always meant to find you, again and again. If you're still here, still listening, still breathing quietly through the ache, then I want to tell you something. I hope you never forget they didn't leave you. Not really. They just changed form. They returned to where they came from, to that soft place beyond time, where souls rest and wait and whisper through the veil. And if there's an emptiness beside you now, a silence where their breath used to be, I want you to consider something wild, something sacred. Maybe the space they left wasn't absence, but invitation, an open doorway, a reminder, a calling back to yourself. Because when a soul leaves your life with that much force, it doesn't just disappear, it leaves behind a key to memory, to love, to awakening? What if their love cracked you open so you could feel again? What if their presence showed you what still lived inside you, long after you'd forgotten it was there? What if their brief, beautiful life beside you was not the tragedy, but the miracle? What if their purpose was not to stay, but to stir? You don't have to answer that now. You don't have to believe every word. But if something inside you feels softer now, quieter, more open to wonder, that is enough. That is remembrance doing its work. That is your soul exhaling. So here is my invitation to you. If it feels right, share their name. Share their story. Write in the comments what they meant to you. Tell the world what only your heart can say. And if you've ever felt their presence after a dream, in a new companion, in a moment of impossible knowing, tell us. Not for validation, but for connection. Because every story you tell becomes a bridge for someone else who's still trying to cross the ocean of their own grief. You don't have to heal alone. You were never meant to. And if this message spoke to you, if it helped you remember something that can't be put into words, I invite you to stay close. Subscribe. Walk with us a little longer. We speak of things not often spoken, of the soul, of sacred timing, of love that doesn't end with death. You are not strange for feeling more. You are not crazy for believing there's something beyond. You are remembering. And remembering is the beginning of awakening. So as we close, I want to leave you with this. This was not goodbye. Not for them. Not for you. This was a sacred promise, fulfilled. And when the time is right, when your heart is ready, don't be surprised if you feel them again. In the wind, in a dream, in the eyes of a stranger who isn't really a stranger at all. Because some souls never truly leave. They circle back. They wait. They return. And when they do, you'll know, not with your mind, but with that ancient part of you that never forgot. The part that always, quietly, believed